Regional Council meeting of the 28th of June. Can we please open with a karakia? Charlie, would you please open us this afternoon? Kia ora.
Kia ora tātou, tēnā koe hini wai. Kia ora tātou, nau mai hara mai, ki me o tātou whānau hoki. Me karakia tātou, tō tātou karakia, pakataka te hau. Tō reira pakataka te hau ki te uru, pakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā tara tara ki tai. E hia ki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihe, mauriura.
Tēnā koe, Councillor Lambert. Kia ora tātou katoa, nau mai haere mai, nau mai hoki mai. A warm welcome to your councillors, staff, manuhiri guests, and a reporter with us also. So thank you all for being here, and if you are online, we welcome you also. Some housekeeping. So this meeting is live streamed. In an event of an earthquake, drop cover and hold. And if the shaking is long or strong, we head up the hill to Tiffin Park. In the event of an evacuation, if the emergency alarm sounds, we evacuate at the closest exit and meet on the grass front. And also the wharepaku are out the doors to the right. So do we have any apologies for today's meeting? We have Mike Paku, Tanya Hopmans, who will be replaced by Kiri Ropiha. Also, we have late attendance by Martin Williams at 2:00. So I'm happy to move those. If you'd like to second, thank you, Councillor Van Beek. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carry. Are there any notices? There are none. Any conflict of interest declarations? There are none. Confirmation of minutes on the 31st of May. Are there any amendments to be made? Are there any amendments to be made? No? That's great. Can I please have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Van Beek and Councillor Sears. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Thank you. Call for minor items not on the agenda.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, I would like to raise an item. Silt stabilisation for health, and I'll address it at the time.
Thank you. Councillor Harding, any other minor items?
Yes, please, Chair. Weekend weather and staff acknowledgement.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. In terms of the agenda, I'd like to propose a change to the agenda. On item 9, charging of section 36 RMA freshwater science charges where legal impediments exist. We'd like to seek advice from our CEO, Bill Bayfield, on the direction moving forward, given the inability to provide the legal advice in this paper.
Madam Chair, I think it's entirely appropriate that we provide the legal advice when you make this decision. Hence, I'd recommend that we withdraw the paper at this stage. I will clarify the legal advice and then come back to you in your next meeting.
There's no need for discussion in this. Could I please have a mover and a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Van Beek and Councillor McIntosh, to remove this item. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Thank you very much. So we're into our first decision item. So the Hawke's Bay Regional Water Assessment. So please invite up Chris Dolly, Tom Skirman, Erin.
Just those.
No.
Yep, Tom and Erin.
Tom and Erin. Before we start the presentation and a summary of the paper presented, I'd just like to acknowledge the enormous amount of work from the team gone into this assessment. It is a milestone. It will be released publicly by the end of this item, if we choose so to be. So thank you very much for that work that you've done. Also, that it's an acknowledgement that it's the first of its kind nationally. So without further ado, thank you, team.
Thank you, Chair. So look, I'll just hand over to Tom and Erin, but there's no a detailed presentation. It's really a discussion around the paper, and I'll hand over to Tom to just lead you through.
So thanks Chris, and kia ora koutou everybody, and thanks Erin. I'm pleased and slightly relieved to be able to present this report to you today. Can I just do a quick time check? How long have you got?
We have 5 minutes.
5 minutes?
Plus.
Any questions?
No. We've got a chunk over the next 4 items, so yeah. You guide us through.
Got one out.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just conscious of the fact that, look, it's an incredibly detailed and complex report about an incredibly detailed, contentious and complex issue. And I could spend a lot of time here trying to drive you through the report, some of you not for the first time. I think I'll just take your guidance here. I'm kind of keen just to present an overview of what it's saying and then provide an opportunity for councillors to
Absolutely,
make their
that sounds
comments. Is that
fantastic.
okay? So I will try to, I know I always promise that I'll try to rattle through this, but I will genuinely try to rattle through this. And so, like I say, very pleased to be able to present the regional water assessment. Just a note there, co-funded by Kanoa, formerly the Provincial Growth Fund, in terms of the broader water security program, and their support's been great throughout the project. And I just want to sort of try and wrap this up, in 1 or 2 sentences. And what the regional water assessment tells us, and we'll go into this in a little bit more detail, is that if we look out into the future, 20 to 40 years into the future, there is going to be a big gap between the amount of water that is available and the amount of water that is demanded. And that is, that's probably what we feel to be intuitively true. And certainly the analysis that we've undertaken bears that out. And so the question that then arises from that is, how are we going to manage that? How are we going to deal with that as an organisation and as a community? And it's not a dynamic environment. And so if we do nothing, then we can expect to see severe shortfalls in the amount of water that the community demands and the amount that the environment is able to supply. And the environment can't supply any more than it's got, and so potentially facing some quite radical decisions around the way that water is demanded. And this happens in a context of a huge amount of focus on fresh water, and I particularly want to draw reference to Te Manaro Te Wai, which is going to be one of the core guiding principles of your freshwater plan changes going forward. And that sort of, it locks in what has always been in the process, but is certainly now, front and centre of freshwater planning and freshwater thinking, and particularly concepts around freshwater allocation. And that is that the environment, certainly, is the priority, and then human health is then the next priority, and that's more sort of for our eating and drinking and washing needs. And then all other uses are come behind that. And so at a time when we think about climate change and probably, a much greater volatility of supply, as we've certainly seen in Hawke's Bay this year, we're also seeing, regulation that is pointing to a need to make sure that we're being very cautious around how much water we are holding back in the environment at the start. So there's, so water demand is going to get squeezed from multiple ends. One of the other reasons we've cast out 20 to 40 years is that when we tend to do our planning process, we tend to look at quite relatively short timeframes in terms of 10 years, and we tend to look at sub-catchment levels. And so this was an attempt to look at the region over the long term, and we'll come to some of the reasons for the objectives of this. But the regional water assessment investigated these kind of key questions: how much water do we have? How much water are we using? Who's using it? And how much more might we want to use in the future? And what are our options to deal with the supply-demand imbalances? And so the aims were to sort of develop for the first time in New Zealand, comprehensive regional water accounts using the system of a United Nations framework that we've managed to do. This is to support the decisions that you have to make, that this council will have to make around freshwater planning decisions, build information and knowledge for the community so we can have continually evolving informed discussion around the community and the platform for that discussion, and then understand what are the concrete things that we're going to do to reduce demand and what options, if any, we've got to increase supply. And I think in relation to those things, I think you can take it as a given that we're going to have some really, really strong programs of work around managing water demand, because managing water supply is very complicated and very uncertain. So I think the one uncertainty that you can take from this report is that there's going to be a huge amount of focus on managing water demand. The regional water assessment, again, the reports are going to be hopefully available shortly, and we're trying to paint sort of this regional picture of water, and we looked at the 1920 year. In that year, it was quite a dry year. There was 16.3 billion cubic metres of water. We think about 14 billion cubic metres of water flowed through the system, and it was quite a dry year. It was about 79% of our average year, and I think it was a year that I think potentially the Waipawa might have been on ban for for quite a long time, and so it was a dry year, and you tend to think that water use in a dry year would be larger, and that is true, and certainly in relation to groundwater. But sometimes when river levels get quite low and rivers go on ban, as in the case of the Waipawa, then you actually see water use drop off because the water can't be taken. But in that year, 138 million cubic metres of water was abstracted from the system, roughly 2/3, 1/3 groundwater, and surface water, and that was across the region. And so we've had to explore a lot of data sets to get this information, and they're not all perfect. But I mean, it's a new way of looking at the information, and I wouldn't want to think that 138 million is going to become a number that we anchor around. It was that year, and so it doesn't form a reference year. But helpfully, it was a dryish year, so we can sort of use it to think about what might be coming up. Consistent with, pretty much this picture globally, 64% of our water is used by agriculture in the primary sector. The next biggest water user is the municipal authorities, the district councils and city councils, and that was 20%. And then the third biggest water user of 13% was the manufacturing and processing industries. And again, a lot of the manufacturing and processing, obviously very close relationship to that agricultural use and things like that. And so, the municipal authorities have been, made a big contribution to this project in terms of trying to get into their data and things like that. And we've had some interesting conversations with manufacturing and processors around that and around their water use, and trying to build their understanding of Te Manaro Te Wai and how they, need to be aware that new frameworks and things like that will, potentially treat, their consents. Be putting a lot of focus and attention on their consents. Because we have this data in the form it is, we can start breaking it down and looking across the regions. And I won't speak to all of this, but you can see where the water is used in the region in that year. And probably no surprises given where the population pressures are, and certainly Heritonga and Aquifer and Ruatana for Aqua being big drivers of water use, and so obviously a big portion coming from Central Hawke's Bay and Hastings, and just acknowledging that Napier gets their water from the Heritonga Aquifer as well. And an emerging story that comes through the report around the relative abundance of water in Wairoa and the low abstraction there. Partially because there is no great groundwater system up there, but it certainly is we all know Wairoa. It's there's where there may be shortage of water in other regions. There's opportunities in Wairoa to at a regional level to sort of balance the scales. So that's the present. Then we have to look at the future, and again, I'll rattle through very quickly with this. We took the data and we made some assumptions looking out into the future. We made some assumptions around sort of economic futures. We made some assumptions around climate change scenarios, and we made some assumptions around how good are we going to be at incrementally every year improving our use of water and reducing leaks, reducing wastage, better irrigation technology. Scenario one, and we'll talk to the outputs of this shortly, assumed no improvements in water use intensity. And so that's effectively, we just carry on, and what happens. Scenario 2 introduced, sort of annual improvements in water use of sort of between 0.6 and 1%, which over 40 years is a huge savings of water. So even though we're presenting scenario 2 as sort of like the middle of the road scenario, you should be mindful of the fact that there are some very, strong water savings assumptions built into that scenario. In scenario 3, the modellers looked at what we call quite aggressive savings in water use, between sort of 1.2 and 2.1% per annum, which again over 40 years is using a fifth amount of water, by 2060. So. And I think it's a useful scenario for understanding, what some of the decisions that might need to be taken as we go forward. So if we look at these numbers, if we do nothing, and believe me, there's a range of scenarios that come through here in the technical reports attached to this assessment. By 2060, potentially a shortfall of 61 million cubic metres. By 2040, and by 2060, 115 million cubic metres. That's assuming we just make no improvements in our water use. Under scenario 2, by 2040, we're a shortfall of 25 million cubic metres, and out to 33 million cubic metres by 2060. And again, if we're incredibly good, either through technology or allocation frameworks, at clawing back water use, if we, achieving these high improvements in water use intensity, there is a scenario out there in the future where we're fine. We don't need to worry. We can get there strictly through quite strong demand management, and so those are the three scenarios. And what we've presented, I think, in the report and part of the conversation is mostly around scenario 2, which I'm going to say is, already has some quite aggressive savings assumptions. So we begin to see this picture, going out into the future, and this is sort of classic supply-demand stuff in terms of, if we do nothing, what's the gap going to be? If we do something, what's the gap going to be? And the flat line represents current use. And because obviously there's a fundamental assumption of this work is that there's no more water to allocate, so there's no assumptions around increasing, areas of irrigation or things like that, and just because there might be land available because there's not water available. But what we haven't modelled and what we haven't tried to model is what are the future supply scenarios, because I think that's probably too challenging at a district and catchment level yet. Maybe that will be possible in the future. So in some respects, the scenario 2 is, assumes that the supply, doesn't get any worse, and we probably know that that's probably not a safe assumption given the volatility. And so, there's a good chance that, we may actually see the supply, decrease, certainly, over time, and you'll see that gap grow. And so I think another point to note is that, again, through your planning processes and things like that, they will invariably move that flat line in terms of the current use, because that really represents what the allocation is. And so if the allocations are clawed back, then the gap grows. I might just butter on. And so mentioned earlier, so this raises a question of how are you going to deal with this, and I think the primary focus is going to be on demand management. And so that is clearly a lot of work needs to be done with irrigators to improve, to consistently improve the efficiency, and clearly in terms of working with territorial authorities and industry around what are the improvements that can be made either through technology, or if technology can't get us there, just through pure form changes in allocation frameworks and allocation rules that can keep the system in balance and give effect to Mana Rotuai. Water pricing may or may not be a part of the future. I think there's a lot of water to go under the bridge in relation to water pricing, and I think rights and interests are going to be at the forefront of that of that discussion before we see much in the way of water pricing as being an economic instrument to deal with the supply and demand program. So while the focus is on demand, as I've mentioned, to achieve to achieve sort of neutrality and water balance out by 2060 through demand management alone, is going to require a huge amount of heavy lifting off, either improvements in water use or in changed, in reductions in clawbacks and allocation. So at the same time, again, with the support of the Provincial Growth Fund, we've been investigating options for how do you, are there options available to increase the supply of water, which is the other side of the supply-demand equation. And we've got a number of projects, again, related to what we're doing within the water security program, but then there are wider programs available, right across council in terms of managing supply. And I believe you had a presentation on last Wednesday around natural river recharge and things like that. And so those are all, while they might not sit specifically in this program at this stage, they form part of the wider amount of work that's doing here. So in Central Hawke's Bay, as we've reported previously, we're looking to do a science pilot trial on understanding managed aquifer recharge. In Heratonga, we've been undertaking investigations to understand, are there above ground water storage options that could operate as a community scale, mostly to deliver environmental benefits, to offset those tight periods in the summer. And clearly there's a lot of work going in around wetlands, and the territorial authorities doing a huge amount to figure out how can they improve their efficiencies. So this gets us to the recommendations, and I'll pass it back to you. So I think these are the recommendations in the paper. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
thank you, Tom.
I'll pass back to you.
Yeah, that was a great presentation. You probably felt like you've done it a million times. So
you probably feel like you've heard it a million times.
One very publicly now. So thank you. Any comments or questions for Tom and the team, knowing that this report is finalised and will be released today? Thank you, Councillor McIntosh.
Thanks, Chair. I should just acknowledge the fantastic work that this report represents. It's a taonga for us, in my view. We are really rich in the information we have. The question I have is a fundamental one where it refers to the environment having no more to give. In fact, I think what you mean is the water the environment gives us is not evenly spread, therefore we are short at some times and not at others. In other words, we have, as we've just seen, too much in winter and not enough in summer. So my conclusion, is it correct, in fact, is that the environment's giving us plenty of water. We're just not managing it that effectively.
So we have always had a perception of a surplus of water, which has allowed for a management approach to water that is the management approach that we've got. And I think, so what's new to New Zealand, and it's, becoming particularly acute, is conversations around water scarcity. And so a different framework requires a different management.
Councillor Sears.
Thank you. 2 questions, Madam Chair, if I might. One very quick one. Thanks, Tom. Thank you again for the presentation and for the report. The demand reduction assessment section, there's consultants are currently completing the draft report that explores the demand reduction opportunities. When would we be likely to see that?
In the future.
No.
The draft report.
Yes, I think the draft report's in and the recommendations have been drawn up, and so I think they're coming to you in a month or so.
Oh, very shortly. Thank you. And just my second question is probably actually for Ms Brunton's team. I understand that this is the water assessment report. It's not a recommendation towards anything. It's simply assessing the nature of the water within the district. But how do you see the report moving into actions? Will this be through the regulatory team, and what are the next steps, and what will be the timeline that we expect to see some more information around those options?
So while Katrina is thinking the correct answer, this report is information, and this report is information for council, it's information for the community. There's not a decision hanging off the end of that, and I think that will feed into a number of conversations around regional strategic plans, but particularly freshwater planning processes. And so it's more information for the community, that talks about the supply demand. So.
Ms Brunton, would you like to add anything further?
Actually, I probably didn't need to. Tom was absolutely on the money. This will become part of the information set that we will use as we develop our new freshwater plan under the MPSFM, and we'll build on those policy and regulatory frameworks that we already have under our existing plans. But more importantly, including Te Mana o Te Wai as we go forward.
Thank you, Ms Brunton. Councillor Harding.
Kia ora, Chair. Well, hopefully I'll get a chance to make some comment later on, but a quick question, an intentionally leading question for Tom that will hopefully provide some real clarity. Is this report simply a Trojan horse for promoting dams, or alternatively for promoting Te Mana o Te Wai to an unsuspecting community in both cases?
So is it two Trojan horses? Was it one Trojan horse or the other?
I'm asking you.
So look, I'm grateful for the question, because I think, regional council is, former staff member, but, we live and breathe this stuff and we know what's coming, and so we see, policy development coming a long way down the track. It has been surprising, particularly in relation to the manufacturing processing sector, around just the lack of understanding around what Te Mana o Te Wai means and where the conversation and how this planned process will unfold. So it's been helpful in that respect, and I think we were at pains in the report. Sometimes I feel like we're repeating ourselves to get that into a document that was in public and in a way that was possibly readable, because it is, it is central to water decision making. So that's your first Trojan horse. It's not a setup for that. It's just you've got to understand around around the processes and what the outcomes that are being sought. In relation to, is it a Trojan horse for water storage? But right through the program, we've always effectively taken the long-term view, figured out, okay, well, what does the deficit look like? Because intuitively it feels like there's going to be a deficit in the future, and I think Gabrielle, has indicated that perversely that, we're in for some tough times, on both sides of the coin. And so how radically you pull that demand lever will in part depend on whether you've got any supply levers. And so we need to understand if you do have supply options, because if you don't, that is going to inform how hard you pull the demand lever and how quickly.
Correct.
Fantastic answer, fantastic report. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Councillor Harding. Councillor Curtin.
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Tom, and the entire team. The report is a milestone for the whole organisation, and it's drawn on the skills, expertise, knowledge of probably right across the board, the whole team. So well done for pulling that together in such a coherent fashion. I've got this question for you, given the circumstances of this year, post 14th of February, and the limitation to resources that we've got facing us, which I think will colour any steps. So my question really is, given that the situation we're in, where are the best bangs for bucks? Where should we look? Is it demand? Is it supply? Is it where can we go to straight up with the limited resources we've got to get on this journey to manage our resources, our water resources, much more with much more benefit than we have in the past?
Yeah, so thanks for your comments and your question. And so your best bang for your buck is demand management. It's I mean, at a very basic level, it costs nothing to not waste water. And so it's the same as electricity, it's the same as a whole bunch of things. And so to the extent, to your point, Jock, we've come from a long period of water abundance, that ship has turned some time ago into waters of water scarcity, the water you don't use is definitely is the cheapest water you'll find. And so I think this council always has and will always continue to do, and it has through Plan Change 6 and also, in the proposed tank plan change, constantly working on those clawbacks. I think you're seeing huge investment or focus on the territorial authorities, which are big water users, as the need to, come up with new ways to manage that water down. And so I know the report was mentioned, and it was, it's unfortunate that I just didn't get the other report to you in time ahead of this around the work that council was committed to doing around just focusing around, what are those interventions and what are the best bang for the bucks. And we hope that you'll get a paper shortly that will get you to sort of dive right into that very question.
Thank you. Councillor Roadley.
Not a question. I just wanted to acknowledge the fantastic report and the way that you've presented it with the visual displays of those numbers, which actually, so thank you to the team who are doing that. It actually makes it, for myself and I'm sure for many members of the community, a real tangible way to start thinking about water as in those different scenarios, and actually to begin to really understand and consider how Te Mana o Te Wai and other ways of thinking of water and water use can be brought into our own lives. So thank you, really appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor Van Beek.
Good. I know we're in question time, and I always fail to ask questions, so I ask a question first, so I don't forget. Have you, by any chance, measured any effect on streams and rivers when actual bans went on during that period? So that's my question. But first and foremost, one of the reasons I'm at this council is actually because of water. I never wanted to be a councillor, and I'm a useless councillor when it comes to it. But water was something that was very important for my community that I represent. And this report really is an amazing piece of work that you and your team have put together, because finally we actually can have something that we can measure. And once again, it comes down to, if you can't measure, you can't manage. And we now have numbers in front of us, and there are some assumptions made in the report that we as an industry, while reading it, already know that we actually will make changes, even if we are not asked by Mrs. Brunton's team to change. We will actually make these changes, because as you said, the cheapest water is the water that you don't use. So we already will be making decisions now as to what we will plant, how we will plant. And if we don't do it, the banks surely will, because they will drive us. That's how it goes. And the Twyford example is one where we never charged per cubic metre. We actually based it on the value of your property, because that drove us as an industry. So this is actually a great report, and by actually going out there and actually talking to our key industry leaders, you really have started sowing the seed, and we'll see some tangible results from this report, regardless of what we do as a council. So remember my question?
Yeah, so happily your question's for Ian Maxwell, it's not for this report, because this report looked at consent data, meter data, made some model assumptions and things like that. And I think one of the recommendations that possibly will come back to you in terms of how do we manage demand is, how do we improve our data? And is this something, even though this has taken a long time to do for a first crack, do you try and do this on a regular basis so you actually see how you're tracking and things like that? But in terms of, did we monitor flows and things like that on the way through, that's a question for Mr. Maxwell.
Councillor Hokianga.
Kia ora, and thanks for the report, and just supporting previous comments by the other councillors about the visuals that you've been able to place in front of us, those numbers. The comments that I'm going to make probably reflect a mana whenua perspective and what mana o te wai might look like, and there's variations, and at times it can be very ambiguous, and I guess within the context of those at place. I just I guess slide 2 looks at, defines the 1, 2 and 3, or environmental health first, human health, and then all other users. And going to slide 7, I guess that pie graph there that sits there, it really sort of gets us to confront the realities, right? I guess the non-reticulated households at 2% and the 64% of agriculture, including irrigation, that's for mana whenua to visualise that and to see that as an indication that I think the perspectives would reside in and around or centred around economic trade-offs here. And so if you flick back to that slide 2, in terms of one, the environment, and 2, human health, I think there's definitely some numbers to be crunched and head back the other way. It appears as though all the arrows that are supposed to be going up are going down, and those that are going down are meant to be going up. So I just would make those comments, but to say well done in being able to provide that for us today, in the interest of mana whenua perspectives. It's good. It's good. It provides us an opportunity to see that without all the encompassing words.
Thanks very much. And so I really appreciate the comments. And I think in the report we were at pains to try and not trying to define or have even have a crack at defining what Te Manaro Te Wai would mean and why we haven't worked with the supplier, because that's a conversation to come. And if this report helps inform that conversation, then that'll be a great outcome.
Thank you, Councillor Hokianga. Councillor Foley.
You want me to move, Chair?
Oh, if you'd like to.
Yeah, I'm happy to move the recommendations.
Thank you. Do you have a second? Councillor Van Beek, and would you like to speak to those? Thank
Yes,
you.
thanks, Chair. Honoured to be moving and accepting the report for release. Like Councillor Van Beek, I stood on this council for all things water, quickly became something else which I can't quite remember at the moment. But you know, I've been living in Hawke's Bay all my life and farming all my career, and yeah, water's been a big issue right through that, and it remains up till today, even though it's slightly unusual or different problem we've got right now. But we know, as you said, we'll swing from one way to the other. So I just want to say, you know, well done on the report and all the effort that's gone in. It's taken a number of years, I know, but this council, this organisation has looked at the water issue many times before, but just looking at the levers or the tools you're talking about in the report on an individual basis, and really looking back, you know, this report should have been what we did first, because it's going to, we've got to keep making decisions about what levers we pull, what tools we pull out of the toolbox, and this report's going to be instrumental in allowing us to make informed decisions. So thank you very much, Tom, Erin, Amanda, and the team.
Thank you. Councillor Van Beek.
No, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Well, with that, we have recommendations for the foundation document to support the freshwater planning and decision-making, the assessment to be released. Also, that we agree to transfer the ownership of the assessment to our policy and planning team for future decisions. So with that on the table, all those who agree say aye.
Aye.
And those against, carried. Thank you very much. Kia ora. Well done. We are up to decision item 6, the Wairatahi Reserve Exchange.
Thank you, Chair. So we'll just invite Rebecca up. This is I guess a land exchange that the previous chief executive agreed to in principle. It's quite complex due to the nature of the exchange, and so we have Rebecca along really to take you through a couple of the key points, and we'll take the paper as read and then are happy to answer any questions. To enable this transaction to occur, we do need a decision of council to make the recommendation through to the Minister.
Lily, welcome.
Thank you. Kia ora katoa. Thank you for the introduction, Chris. With me, I've got Marcus Hill, who is the project manager for the developer, the Hiratonga Tamatea Settlement Trust, in the event there's any questions there. So, as Chris said, I'll walk through briefly, if you like, the executive summary. So the paper in front of you seeks a resolution from Council. It reports back in relation to the outcome of the required public notification process of 1 month under the Reserves Act for any proposed exchange. The exchange itself proposes a currently artificially formed local drain, which is referred to as the Wellwood Drain, to the edge of Flaxmere, located approximately between the southern extension of the Hawke's Bay Expressway and Dundee Drive and Flaxmere. The area is approximately 4,700 square metres, and it was vested in the Regional Council and Trust as a local purpose reserve at the time the Crown disposed of the land following the construction of the southern extension to the Hawke's Bay Expressway, which is how Hiratonga Tamatea Settlement Trust came into the ownership at that point. That was followed by further acquisition of land immediately to the south from Stock Road, which now forms a total area of 28 hectares. Within the area purchased subsequently by the Trust, that forms part of the Iron Gate Stream, and an area of approximately 6,000 square metres is proposed for exchange to that. Prior discussions with both regional council officers, Hastings District Council, Department of Conservation has indicated good support for the exchange, particularly with respect to increase in values and positive drainage following the proposed residential development of the Wairatahi development proposed by the Hiratonga Tamatea Settlement Trust. The vesting of part of the Iron Gate Stream as a reserve, it's currently in Crown ownership, would enable ownership and management of the stream to be regularised and will improve conservation, public access and recreation opportunities on the site. Public notification, as I previously stated, was required. No objections were received to the required 1 month public notice period. The next step is normally for consideration and, if duly received, resolution by Council to providing the final piece of the application to the Department of Conservation for the Minister's approval. The Department has already processed the application to the point of understanding the values for the exchange and has indicated that it will present a positive exchange with respect to values.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Thank you. Chris, could I just ask any glaring risks that you've come across in this recommendation?
No, so our technical team has been through and are happy to support the process. Ordinarily, land exchanges would be quite simple between organisations and between chief executives. This one does require a specific decision of council, and that's just part of the process that we need to go through. But I'm very comfortable with the exchange, and we've had a full technical review in terms of the streams, etc.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for Chris in the team? Thank you, Councillor Harding.
Thank you, Chair. Look, thanks for the report. I think it's a good idea. I'm looking for just a little clarification around streams versus drains and what the impact of undergrounding part of the drain, which is currently exposed, and also just making clarity from my own mind around both that and also the additional impact of the additional hard surfacing from this proposed subdivision and to what extent that matters or not. So just to explain where I'm grounded in is having been through the tank process, I'm well used to the idea that when we characterise something as a drain, we're probably doing a disservice to what used to be there, and that many drains now are just streams that have been engineered. And if you look at the photos, it's of the drain versus the stream in terms of water volume at that particular time and the overall characterisation, it's not apparent that there's a huge difference. So I'm just trying to get some assurance around the impact of undergrounding a portion of that drain, how the above ground portion of that drain will be treated, and also whether there is some particular impact from the additional runoff in that area that has been anticipated and taken into account. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Yep.
Kia ora koutou, everyone. Thank you for the question. So, part of the development, I don't have the plan in front of me, is what we're calling a stormwater management area, which is around 54,000 cubic metres of additional compensatory storage for the development. And the wellwood drain in its current form is piped through Flaxmere, accepting the network discharge to the point where the pipe comes out of the ground into Wairatahi. So the additional runoff is going to be treated much more significantly from the development itself by way of first flush basins, and will become part of what the storage area of the stormwater management area is. So the piping of that won't impact the runoff that it's receiving from Flaxmere, because that's already getting piped to the boundary anyway. So it's really 170 metres of extension, which allows the development to be, to satisfy the urban form, to be not disjointed, not have lateral spread issues. It'll be piped through two twin 1350s from the current outlet, and then it'll open up into the large, sort of 6 hectares of additional stormwater management area. And that's attenuated back to 80% of pre-development flow as per the ruling with HDC. HDC we've jointly engaged E2 Environmental, who have done all the stormwater management calculations, and widely held that the stormwater outcomes will be far superior to what it is currently of piping effectively street runoff through to the Iron Gate. Wellwood will be realigned over to the southern side in the stormwater management area, which will also open up a large area of shared recreation area that's agreed to be vested with HDC. So in an event that the stormwater coming through exceeds the current volumes within the channel, it's got the ability to dissipate into the large basin and then either soak away or be drained out slowly in a controlled manner to the Iron Gate. So effectively creates more protection for the Iron Gate that it will currently have in a flood situation.
Thank you.
Councillor Curtin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for some clarity around the recreation zone, which is sort of adjoining the expressway, if I can take you to attachments 1 and 2. Have you got those in front of you? So I'm seeing, if you consider the triangulation back to the expressway, a zone that's being turned into, I'm taking it into public reserve and public amenity, is that correct?
Yes.
So does that include if I'm looking at attachment 2, the zone adjoining the expressway, it looks like it's under permanent plantings there. So that's included, that piece of land is included in that recreation zone?
Sorry, I'm just, are you talking
on attachment?
Talking about the sliver, aren't you?
Well, it's just above section 52 SO 43810.
Oh, yes. So that forms part of the stormwater management area also.
So will that be a stormwater overflow zone there? Is that...
So if you look at attachment 1 and follow down the expressway, that white line there is the Wellwood drain realigned.
Yes.
So that area into the bottom corner next to the people walking will be planted out.
Sure. So that area is already incorporated into the plan?
Yes, and that's trying to provide a visual and acoustic buffer by way of planting.
Okay.
And keep people away pedestrian-wise from going too close.
Sure. And finally, just in terms of ongoing maintenance, you say that's vested into the Hastings District Council?
Yes.
Reserve area?
Yes. So they've agreed to vest it.
They'll administer that
yes.
land. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Van Dyke.
Yeah, totally off topic, but you would expect it from me. Bill, cut it out. A huge thumbs up from me and Martin. He doesn't know about it yet, but this is the first subdivision that we have seen in Hawke's Bay where you've actually had separate cycleways So you actually provide here for people to drive safely and children to go to school on active transport. I think that's really good. So my question is, and these are, you can see the little bikeways, and I thought, oh, that's back on the road again, you know, grump, grump, grump. But then you actually look really close, they're actually separate cycleways. Now, my question is, so I have a question. Who directed you to actually develop, to design that into this development? Is that now policy from Hastings District Council, or is that just goodwill of people?
So this is being run by Hiratonga Tamatea Settlement Trust, as you know, and it is their first foray into development of this scale. So they have aspirations from a social perspective for Flaxmere, and they're incredibly keen, and you'll see the Minister referred to it in the referral, of increasing access to the Irongate stream. And topographically, and the requirement to have the stormwater management area pushes you towards the expressway, and having you know, that distance from the expressway. But having that shared cycleway, shared access way has been a big priority for HTST, and creating the ability to loop through up Portsmouth and link back through to the Flaxmere town centre. There are quite, I'm off topic now, but there are quite innovative sort of design features here. They're pushing for 22-metre wide roads, the cycleway, shared cycle and pedestrian of 3-metre wide. So they're really trying to encourage that ability, as you say, to get back onto the bike and access the nature. And part of this exchange is really increasing the riparian planting on the Irongate, and we've engaged with Chris's team about how that fits into the Karamu catchment works, and really trying to treat the water better while they have it in their custody. So it's just a really high priority. The Wairatahi refers to the water, and I'm not 100% sure, Darren's my man here, he's not here, but they are really committed to trying to enhance the ecological outcomes here and get children in particular back closer to it.
Very good, excellent, well done.
Fantastic. Are there any other comments, questions?
Hopefully you didn't mind me.
Councillor Sears.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very happy to move. The whole, every part of it seems to be a win-win. It's better for HBRC in managing our stormwater. It's cost neutral. The development, as we've heard a little bit of, is going to improve value to community and economy. So very happy to move, and thank you for all your work.
Thank you, and I'll just take the opportunity to thank Chris and his team, and James in his previous role as Chief Executive. It's been really appreciated in terms of moving it through the MFE process.
Thank you. And a seconder, would you like to speak?
Yeah, and I only will actually vote in favour of if it's the speed limit is set at 30k. Just joking.
We're keen.
All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against carry. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, just introducing item 7, resetting the general rate for the 2022-23 rating year. Kia ora, Chris and Chelsea.
Just changing the numbers.
Afternoon all. So the first paper here, Chelsea's pulled together about resetting the general rate. During our interim audit visit, Ernst & Young noticed an irregularity in our original rate setting for the current financial year, where the calculation factors for the general rate between Central Hawke's Bay and Wairoa were inadvertently stated the wrong way around. We've sought legal advice in terms of how we correct this, and the best way to do this is a resolution in council to reset the rates before we get to the end of the financial year. And so I'll take the rest of the paper as read, and if there are any questions.
Thank you. It seems quite straightforward. Are there any questions? Councillor Harding?
Oh, no, but I'm happy to move when we get to that.
Happy to move, happy to second. No further comment? Your Honour, thank you. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Thank you.
CHB.
The quickest in and out.
But supplementary, well done team for tidying up. It's not ideal that it happened, but it's a very complicated life that you lead managing these rates, and we appreciate that. Perfection is something that all of us aspire to.
Thank you. Moving on to 8, are you saying on? Yes, the exemption of the council-controlled organisation in terms of Hawke's Bay Disaster Relief Trust.
Okay.
Thank you.
So for this one, back in May 2020, the Hawke's Bay Disaster Relief Trust was launched as a shareholding between 5 councils, 20% each in there. At that time, there was an exemption by all of the local authorities that is exempt from the requirements relating to council-controlled organisations. That exemption needs to be reviewed every 3 years and renewed. So again, we've taken some legal advice on this. The trustees of the Hawke's Bay Disaster Relief Trust have voted or resolved that Hawke's Bay Regional Council is the only one that needs to make this decision and can make it on behalf of the overall trust. So what we're putting in front of you here is to review that you agree that we don't actually need, that trust doesn't need to adhere to all of the council-controlled organisation requirements, and that we renew this exemption for another 3 years.
Thank you, Chris. Kia ora, Susie. Would you like to add to that?
Sorry, through you, Chair. Sorry for interrupting. By putting this paper in front of you doesn't state, or please don't think that by exempting this as a CCO exempts it from good governance and financial statement preparation. So the trust acts, it has its own trust deed. There are meetings that are held with the mayors and chair that see financial results, that understand the money's going through this. So please, as we ask for it to be exempt from a CCO, it doesn't mean that it's exempt from very good governance practices and preparing financial statements behind the scenes. I just wanted to add that.
And just before we carry on, I'd like to just hand over to Councillor Wolf Foley, just to say safe as I am the chair and a trustee of this trust. Thank you.
Sorry, does it take over the
Yes,
paper?
the paper.
So, yeah, sure, thanks, Chair. I wasn't quite sure. Any questions from the floor? Councillor Curtin.
Thank you, Mr. Matt. Mr. Chairman. Look, just thank you, Susie, for reporting on the process and confirming that this process is not exempt from good practice in terms of accounting and reporting, etc. Can you help with a bit of a snapshot of the reporting monitoring processes that you undertake, and can you confirm, or is it appropriate that that set of documentation comes to the Audit and Risk Committee at some point, or where do you see the accountability taking place?
So the Disaster Relief Trust has met 5 times since February to outline how the trust will work. It set the criteria for the Disaster Relief Trust that issued the $1,000 portions, the $2,000 portions and the $10,000. That trust has seen summaries of across their region, how many applications have been processed. They have interacted and signed off on interaction we've had with Red Cross and key fundraisers where we sought money from externals. So they are aware of the processing. They also have approved to date where we have sought casual resources for assessment, as well as engagement with Pricewaterhouse to confirm process documentation and control documentation. To date, that is the information that they have seen. Our intent, however, is to not come back to this council with disaster relief papers, etc., I guess for use of a better word, but we will be providing a summary throughout into the community after the 30th of June of where all the money has been spent. We do intend, along with that information, to not have an audit, but an agreed upon procedure type review undertaken by an external, just to validate that some of the controls that we applied were accurate and that the apportions, etc., that we did align with the documentation that we had.
Supplementaries?
Just to move.
Oh, I think there's another question over here. Somebody was there? No? No, happy for you to move then.
Yeah, happy to move, Mr.
And Councillor Sears the second.
Just very briefly, look, thank you so much for the work that's gone into managing that extraordinarily difficult and the complexities of distributing funds in this way is never an easy task. And thank you for considering the accountability around it. Often these types of funds and their whereabouts and where they've gone become a significant point of interest for the public. Unfortunately, they often can be targets for nefarious activity by outside people taking advantage of the opportunity. So we're very pleased to see good process, good governance and good control around it. So well done to the team.
Thank you. Councillor, would you like to speak? Any further speakers? No? With that, all those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Thanks, Will.
Yeah, no worries.
We move into report and recommendations from Corporate and Strategic Committee in the last meeting. So hand it over to you, Neil, to summarise, and then we can move through that item. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could direct Council to the recommendations 1 through to 8, and you'll note that these recommendations, the first 1 and 2 are to receive the report and recommendations from Corporate and Strategic Committee, and noting that we've already adopted the annual plan for 23-24. We've adopted the annual compliance monitoring and enforcement report, and we have approved already the decision made to set the independent director remuneration for HBRIC. The area that this council at this point is to confirm recommendation 7, which is to do with the HBRIC role, etc., that we've had discussions, and to confirm that direction of travel. Just in noting, Madam Chair, in regard to the annual compliance monitoring and enforcement report, I think it does need to highlight that the document itself encapsulates a tremendous amount of work that the staff do in the compliance and regulatory environment. And I note that there's something like 3,056 consents that were monitored during the year. Tremendous effort that goes into that. So it's the engine room in many respects of the delivery that we've got as council, a very important part. So even though we've already adopted that, I think it's worth noting to recognise the work that's done. So we're left with recommendation 7, and as councillors, we've already had significant discussion on the role of HBRIC. And we know where that's going, but I think it's well worth commenting at this point on it. So I'll leave that back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Is there no anomalies or concerns in terms of the recommendations? Are you happy to move, Councillor Curtin?
Yes.
And a second. Thank you, Councillor McIntosh. Would you like to speak any further?
No, thanks, Madam Chair.
Councillor
Look, I'd just
McIntosh.
say in respect of recommendation 7, it's high time that HBRIC was unshackled to achieve its potential. So I'm strongly in support of that.
Thank you. Any other speakers? There are none. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. We now move on to the renewal of the Health and Safety Governance Charter. So we have leading this is Mr. Bill Bayfield, who has just popped out. But we have Liana on here as well, who...
I think actually through you, Chair, Kirsty McInnes is meant to be coming down, so I'll just message her quickly.
That's fine. If we are happy to move on to item 12, if we have the right staff member here for that. So we have there. That is you, Leanne, with Desiree. Are you happy to lead this, Leanne?
I
Or would you
am, sorry,
prefer-
apologies.
Are there any flakes in the cupboard? Maybe we should give it Stop being here.
Yes, so we're on to item 12, the Hawke's Bay Regional Council Local Governance Statement.
So, thank you, Chair. This is quite a ways behind time, I have to admit, because of the impacts on our governance team workloads, really, with Anna Lee leaving us at the end of the year and then not having either Peter or Alison for a period of time. I was it. So what I've done is the screenshots and the snippets are an indication of where I know that things have to be changed. And a good number of those changes, you may have noticed, are where I want to link to information that's already there, so I'm not repeating a whole lot of things. I still need to sit down with the web team to make sure that how I want it to work is doable, and make sure that it's the experience for the person that's looking at it rather than me putting it in there that I want to be assured is going to be seamless and not having them spending hours trying to search for information. So I'm happy to take any questions and also any suggestions that anyone has for ways of improving what we are putting forward.
Thank you, Leanne. Questions or comments? Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Leanne. Look, just wanted to check that I understand what's proposed here. We don't have a local government statement in terms of a specific proposed piece of paper in front of us that would be at the front of the website on all of this yet. Is that yet to be established, or are you suggesting there would be a series of links to places within our website that would be the government statement?
It's a combination of both. So there is a local governance statement, and that's what the heading on the web page is. And then on that page, there's some information that is in the drop down.
Yeah.
So you'll have this bit and it'll drop down with some information. Within that information also be other links where they can go for further information or more detailed information. Yeah.
I just wanted to make an observation. As a user of the HPR website, I do not find it helpful. The most frequent piece of information or statement that I encounter in searching on our website is, did you find the above information helpful? The answer to which is no, because I couldn't find what I was looking for. The things that I've actually struggled to find the most on our website are our long-term plan, our strategic plan, our resource management plans, are the very things that you would expect to find in a governance statement. I honestly have really struggled and had to go through all sorts of different ideas about where they might be. And, you know, I found the 2010 public transport plan in there and things like that, but not up to date. So it's a little bit of a bugbear of mine. So all power to you in getting a statement up front that would mean we can drill down to these really important governance documents at the click of a mouse.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Sears.
Madam Chair. Leanne, I just wondered if you'd used the search terms from the website to drive what people were mostly looking for to help with any of this? When people go onto the website and go into the search box and type in something, have you been tracking those or had
I haven't, but I have to admit that I've had to use those search terms myself to try and find the information I'm looking for in the local governance statement, the long-term plan, the strategic plan, those types of things. So that's why I am particularly convinced I need to sit down with the web team and make sure that I'm doing the right things to make it easier to find.
But we also, you may be able to go back and all those searches and then categorise them by subject. You should be able to see what those common searches are, which would give a drive to what should come up first.
Exactly.
Thank you for the suggestion. Councillor Curtin? No. Councillor Harding?
Thank you, Chair. Look, just page 13, thanks, Leanne. I think this is good direction we're going in here. The diagram on page 13 with permanent committees. Risk and Audit Subcommittee. We've had a couple of conversations about the reporting lines for that, and I think where we landed was that it was not a subcommittee of corporate and strategic, so probably just, if that is correct, then
so
need
yes,
to get that diagram right.
What I need to do at the moment is put it in the way it is standing as of this date. So that will include the change of reporting directly to council. But the terms of reference may, in the review, may change a couple of other things. So in that case, I would update the governance statement when that is resolved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Leanne. I'm happy to accept the report and recommendations here. May I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Roadley. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Thank
I'm just
you.
providing some IT support to my fellow councillors.
I think I found it. Are you
And we're not
helpful?
going well.
Are you helpful?
Leading the blind.
We will return back to item 11, the renewal of the Health and Safety Governance Charter. So just welcoming Kirsty up to the front. Thank you. And Bill, you are the lead author of this paper, if you'd like to lead us.
This is Kirsty. She'll answer any questions. And Kirsty has really looked after me in terms of health and safety in the time I've been here.
Kia ora, everybody. Kia ora. So the purpose of today's catch-up with you is just to renew the governance charter that came out of the Crowe-Horvath audit in 2018. It was implemented in 2019, and then it was implemented again in 2020. It was decided that we would go to a triennial review because that made sense with new councillors coming on board, and so we could discuss the charter then. So everything has been documented in the paper and is documented in the charter, and it's just simply an agreement to move forward with that charter again. We do need it for health and safety governance, and it is a recommendation under WorkSafe New Zealand. Absolutely. Councillor Van Beek.
Yeah, I've got a question. Why is it on the point 5 of the charter responsibilities? This is the second time I've seen it because I'm a second-time councillor. But we should see this more often, I think, in front of us, that once again to realise what our responsibilities are as councillors, because they're actually very important. And I still remember the first time I was sworn in at the War Memorial, is one of the key objectives I had, that as a councillor being responsible for so many people working in the environment, that they all should go home safe. And I think we need to be more aware of this and make ourselves more aware of us, that this is our responsibility under health and safety.
Yep. We delivered the training in November, which doesn't seem that long ago, but seems a long time ago since we've had the cyclone as well. But we would be more than happy to run training for you in terms of understanding your requirements under the legislation and what we do every day to make our people stay safe. I know Councillor Martin had a question from the previous, when we did deliver the training in November, that he would like more information and more reporting. So I have been working with the governance team, and we do have our organisational dashboard. So we are looking to have more information in there from health and safety, rather than provide you with another report. But I'm happy to come at any time, and it can be scheduled to come down and talk to you about the sorts of things that we're engaging in to keep our people safe every day. Thank you. Councillor Curtin.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Kirsty, thanks for bringing this to us, and it is a very important piece of work. I've just got some, and sorry to be pedantic about this, but given the poor performance of the last councillors around the table, way back in 2019, I think they've omitted a few things that need to be put in. So woe behold on them. Going to your paper 7, the charter supports chapter 7 there, or paragraph 7. Chapter supports the health and safety and wellness strategic plan, and then you've attached that to it. And I think you've got copies as well. When we go to that plan, we've got the opening statement that the Hawke's Bay Regional Council Executive Leadership Team is committed to the health and safety and wellbeing of staff. So when I go back, and if I can indulge councillors to go back to the charter itself, on number 5, responsibility, it's got as officers, and I accept, and as councillors, we are the officers, so that's correct. However, what it's saying is there at the end of the opening paragraph there, councillors are responsible for. I contest that and say that we ought to insert, are responsible for providing governance oversight to ensure the executive team is. So it's some wording change which I think reflects and aligns with the strategic plan itself, and it's more accurate in terms of what our governance responsibilities are in relation to the connection with the chief executive and the executive team. Have you got a view on that?
I actually agree with you. So I think that's a really good change in the wording, and I'm happy to make that change for you.
So we're comfortable to adopt it, subject to just correcting that.
Yep.
So which page are you on there, Neil?
Sorry, this is on page 52 of the in terms of the charter itself. Page 51, 52 is the charter, and on the page 52 under responsibilities, heading 5. Stop there. If you see that,
there is the statement
So
on
if you go to
that
the
page,
agenda
and if you
papers,
go
yeah.
to that one there, which is 2 pages up, which I actually refer to, number 5 under the charter.
I like your drawing.
Otherwise,
It does make it more concise in terms of what your governance is, which is the governance and oversight of the
I think more accurate too.
Thank you
And
for
just
that.
sort of one other change at 3, I'd suggest, it says there, our vision is for Hawke's Bay Council to be a benchmarking health and safety business. I'm not quite sure what that means, but when we go to the strategic plan itself, there's a statement there, and I'm rapidly trying to find it.
It is there, yes.
This is
about
on
being
page
world-class.
4 of the, it talks about, based on the Business Leadership Health and Safety Forum world-class leadership model. Can I suggest we substitute benchmarking health and safety business with world-class leadership model?
Yes, we can. Yes, because it aligns directly to the strategy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good spotting, councillor Curtin. So is everyone comfortable with those 2 additions? Yes, thank you. Councillor Harding?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Kirsty. Just draw your attention to page 2 of the charter, 1 and 2 points. One trivial point, which leads to the second point, that we have now a risk and audit subcommittee rather than a finance, audit and risk. So if we can just tidy that wording up. Leads on, and we've already discussed it a bit, but point 6, monitor and review. Council will receive quarterly health and safety reports through the through Council quarterly organisational performance reports. Gone back to those, and looking at those just aligns with the previous comments that there's probably a lack of visibility, detail, and a constant reminding of both the state of health and safety within the organisation and the visibility of it to council. And I think that it most naturally fits into the reporting through the risk and audit. So that would be my suggestion. We look at that, and I just sort of remind councillors that we have already agreed that to an independent review of our risk matrix, our risk approach. So that can be wrapped into that. So I'm not putting all of that on your shoulders, but just that there's an opportunity through that process to just have a look at that reporting.
Yes, and that's what I just said earlier. We are currently working with governance about that organisational dashboard. We set that up in 2020, and it needs to mature, and we need to put some more information in there for you so that it covers off what Councillor Martin was talking to in November. So happy to do that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you. Look, and this is timely, although it's understandable that our minds have been exercised on other affairs of late. But like Councillor Van Beek, this along with stop banks is what keeps me awake at night in this role. What I do think I recall us discussing at our training last November, there's a clue in the number of months between now and then, is that we would have health and safety as a standing item on the corporate and strategic agenda, rather than perhaps risk and audit. I'm a little bit foggy now on how those 2 committees are going to be aligned or not in future. But I really think, because I read all of this and I read all of the charter statements and I was like, do we? Do we have that? Governors will do this and have that. And I was like, every statement I read was like, well, do we do that? I'm not sure. And to answer that question, I needed to go back to the periodic trainings we'd had, the discussion of the charter we had last year. But there's several hundred other agenda items that we've considered in that time frame. So I just think regular, timeous updates, little insights into parts of the system, because what I was encouraged by, sorry, this isn't really a question, it's more of a conversation, is reading the strategic plan that was also, not the strategic plan, the health and safety framework that's also in our materials, and how, you know, the different teams and ELT staff take responsibility for, you know, regular meetings with the staff, and how the contractors are all certified. Because, you know, I was thinking all that work we did on the rebuild, and we, with our contractors, have to ensure gold standard health and safety for what we've just done. I'm thinking, really? Just having a little insights into different parts of the organisation, what perhaps the last health and safety meeting discussed, what came to light on that, how it was reserved, would help us be honest and true to the charter that we're being asked to adopt here. Because I agree, I don't think we at the moment have adequate line of sight, and I don't blame anyone from that. There is so much that the staff are trying to bring to our attention, and that we otherwise have to grapple with. So I just, yeah, more is probably better.
More than happy to provide information to corporate and strategic, and to risk and assurance. So however that comes up in terms of what the meeting schedule looks like, but happy to provide, as you say, a snapshot of what's happened since the last meeting, give you some updates, let you know the progress of some of the things that we're doing, so you have a level of comfort.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the other thing was there was a reference to an audit in June 2022 that was going to be completed by the end of the year. Did that audit happen?
We did an internal audit against the previous framework, the workplace safety management framework that we were accredited to under ACC. So we did an internal review on that. And we have since, I have another paper sitting with governance for risk and assurance regarding the audit that we are moving to. So I'll present that information then.
Thank you. That's great.
You're happy to move, Councillor Curtin?
Happy to move, Madam Chair.
Second? Thank you, Councillor Van Dyke. Did you have a comment or question? Sorry, Councillor Hawke on that.
Just through you, Madam Chair, just a quick one from me, and just looking at the whole, I guess, health and safety management system, I can't help but think where a consideration of a cultural and spiritual safety might sit in this system. An example is probably some of those perceptual barriers for some of our staff out there in the field engaging in some partnerships with iwi Māori, mana whenua, tangata whenua, and in some instances they may not wish to engage in that simply because the perceptional barriers, that might be a very uncomfortable experience for them, and coming out of some of these engagements can actually leave staff in a really compromising position and a real state of vulnerability. So I just think that somewhere in the discussions that need to happen moving on from this is probably the consideration of cultural and spiritual safety.
Can I answer that?
Yes, thank you.
So health, safety and wellbeing also has a wellbeing strategy which covers off the four cornerstones of wellbeing, which encapsulates exactly what you're speaking to. And the health, safety and wellbeing team also has a really close relationship with the Māori Partnerships team, so we're working with them all the time to ensure that as we move through our processes that we are being culturally sensitive.
Okay. Back to the mover and seconder.
I just wanted to propose a slight change to the amendments, and I'm not sure procedurally, Chair, how to do that. We've got a motion on the table for the charter with already 2 amendments, and I just wanted to make another tweak.
Another tweak, okay.
I just
What is your suggestion?
raise what it is, but if you look, Council will receive quarterly health and safety reports through the Council Quarterly Organisation. I'm wondering if that should say council, take the word quarterly out, council will receive health and safety reports through the council quarterly organisation and through reporting to the corporate and strategic committee regarding progress against health and safety implementation. So we're not just confined to the quarterly organisation, which is just a numbers chart of how many incidents and near misses there have been, but there's actually an opportunity for discussion of what some of the ELT meetings have been discussing and the specific issues and how they've been addressed.
Yep. Okay. And that would help address, I think, a further conversation that has been brought up by Councillor Hawke as to, if need be, have those further conversations around cultural safety. Councillor Harding.
Sorry, Chair, but look, just to, if I can.
Point of order. We've moved and seconded to actually carry on with this motion.
Yeah.
You can't just then add more to it, because if that's what we're going to start, you know.
Are we
the
adding,
gate is,
Councillor Harding, are you adding or are you commenting?
Well, we've had a proposal for a tweak to the recommendation, to the resolution, and I just want to point out, I want to further tweak that.
No, wait on. No, we can't do that. We can't.
I'm gonna let Leanne come in here and just give us a bit of procedural guidance.
So, through you, Chair, the actual governance charter is what has been amended by Councillor Curtin's suggestions, in line with those, and also with the suggestion from Councillor Williams. So the recommendation now simply reads that we adopt the charter as amended as agreed. So if everyone's happy with that, I can take.
No, not everybody's happy with that.
You don't want the.
No, I moved on a motion, which now has been altered. That's not how we govern. That's not how we make decisions.
Okay, so
And
we're
it's
going
just
back
purely,
to the original.
and I don't want to be pedantic, but we have to be pedantic, because otherwise, in the future, I'm going to put my hand up and halfway through a motion, I'm going to make change. We just need to be firm on this. Just be tidy. Let's ask Councillor Curtin and myself to drop the motion, and then we can reconvene again. And somebody else can move, and somebody else can.
I'm trying to get Councillor Curtin to talk, because it's his motion.
Yes.
So, Councillor Curtin.
I certainly have sympathy with my seconder, Councillor McBake, but I just wondered, in this instance, given the nature of it, we'll just take one more tweak. Would you mind? No?
No, I'm not going to make a point. No, I'm not going to make a point. I agree for this time, as long as we understand. Yeah. You're the mover of the motion, so I'll go with you.
Councillor Curtin?
Yeah, well, just, Councillor, can you quickly make your point?
Yes, look, it was just simply in Councillor Williams' fine addition, what we've lost is the backstop of a commitment to at least quarterly reporting. So I just wanted to capture that backstop of at least quarterly reporting. Well, I thought that would be an improvement.
I guess I was proposing an amendment to the seconded motion, and debating that, if I could just say that this would be more regular than quarterly, because we would be getting the quarterly organisation reports quarterly, and in addition to that, we'd be getting reporting to the frequency of the corporate and strategic committee meetings, which I understand are every.
So you're requesting
so
more,
it's just
really?
Essentially, you're just clarifying.
Yeah, I mean, how often are the corporate and strategic meetings? They're more than quarterly. Oh, they are. Okay, what's the same?
We've achieved
right.
the same.
Okay,
Well,
so
just,
we're back to the original.
Sure. So, can I speak to that?
Yes, thank you.
I won't take too much time, we're already plotting. But look, I do want to thank you, Kirsty, and I think what this does is bring back to Council the extreme importance of workplace safety. I think not only from a legislative perspective, and you'll note the use of the word officer in the Charter, is that we carry that responsibility. It's under legislation. So we do have that responsibility, as does our executive team via the Charter and the guidance and direction from the Chief Executive. So this is extremely important work, and I don't want to harp on a cyclone event, but things have changed. We've had and likely to have our staff out there in the field, directly in the line of danger, if things continue the way they are, which they will. The other aspect of that are the risks and issues that arise not only on the front line out in the weather, but at home base. So we've had that experience from this event. We've got staff under extreme duress, under extreme pressure and distress even, as a result of their due, if you like, commitment to the organisation, putting out the information they do as best they can, but then coming under a lot of pressure for the work that they do. So as an organisation, I believe this particular charter and its intent ought to pick up and run with what is a much more intensified situation for us as prudent and diligent officers responsible for workplace safety.
Councillor Curtin, Councillor Van Beek. Any other speakers? Round none. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. We've got the team. Thank you. Thank you, Kirsty.
Thank you.
And we are up to item 11, fixing the common seal. There are no questions. Councillor Foley, you're happy to move?
Happy to move, Chair.
I'm happy to second that. All those who agree say aye.
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 Those against, carried. Thank you very much. We can move on to our climate action annual report if staff are available
Pippa's there,
to
yeah.
present. Pippa, kia ora, Pippa, come up the front.
Too efficient.
Take us away, Pippa.
Ahi Māria koutou. Thank you for the opportunity to present my annual activity report. You have it there in front of you. In summary, well, it's been a busy first year to establish this work program, to establish the relationships out in the community, out in with our other councils and our TAs in the region, those partnerships that are necessary to achieve the work program. I hope that the report has kind of communicated that really we're aiming at multiple actions at various levels. So some of those are communication engagement, some of that's technical inputs, and the emission reduction plan. All of those things seem necessary. I mean, I think the words are everyone, everywhere, all at once, that has recently been used with regard to climate action. So that's the aim of this work plan. Highlights would be the two technical inputs, one of those being our regional community carbon footprint, which I presented to you last year in September, which is really the first time we've ever been able to achieve that estimation of our regional greenhouse gas emissions, to know where they're coming from and to really use that to design our actions going forward. The regional climate change risk assessment done by Urban Intelligence recently presented to the Climate Action Committee. That's another technical input that's been achieved to that first stage over this last year. Other highlights would be the Climate Resilience Breakfast hosted in November at the Napier Convention Centre with those 3 speakers. I think there was 120 attendees there, and so that was just to show you how much our community and people want to hear about it and know more about this topic. And the columns and the opinion pieces that we publish regularly in the Hawke's Bay Today. So we are raising awareness, keeping the kōrero up, inviting guest editors to write those columns. They do run fortnightly or every 3 weeks. That's the kind of schedule. So happy to take questions, hear from you.
Kia ora, Pippa, and just acknowledge all the work that you've done across these different platforms, being the lead of the Joint Climate Action Committee. So it's fantastic that we've got this work underway. So just opening that up for questions or comments. Councillor Harding.
Kia ora, Chair. And thank you, Pippa. Lovely to have you back again, and congratulations on the work that's been done to date. I'm going to attempt to answer clause 29, or paragraph 29 of the paper, the feedback on strategic direction for the coming year. But before I do that, I just want to contextualise this conversation by saying that, look, this council, or previous council, did declare a climate emergency. And through Cyclone Gabrielle, we have been living part of a changing climate, and we have heard at the Joint Climate Action Committee that a component of the cyclone is attributable to climate change, so of that intensity. The only reasonable expectation we have for the future is more of the same and more severe on average. And so we have to deal with that. We do not have the luxury of parking our response to the climate emergency as a result of the cyclone. We have to double down on it. So we have to be highly ambitious for the strategic direction for the coming year. And I would like to make the point in that context that whilst the immediate effect of the cyclone on the program has been to narrow the focus of the regional emissions reduction plan to, correct me if I'm wrong, but essentially to stationary heat, so it's all industrial and transport.
And waste, yeah.
Our regional climate footprint tells us that in doing that, we're only focusing on at most 1/3 of our regional climate footprint. So I just want to flag that I think this council needs to be very ambitious on the other 2/3 and not shy away from attempting to engage with that 2/3 that comes from our agricultural sector. And I truly believe that the cyclone gives us the opportunity to have a mature conversation with the whole community about a response. And I truly believe that we have the tools within this region with agriculture and forestry to manage that journey so that this region can be on track with its contribution of the national share of carbon reductions. So that is my challenge to my fellow councillors, to this organisation, to engage with the 2/3 in this term that's coming from agriculture and have those conversations with the community. Thank you.
Harding. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I just had a question. Hello. The transport chapter is going into the draft plan that will be presented to the Climate Action Committee in August. Will that go to the Transport Committee prior? Was that
I think
part of a workshop, or is it going to be?
4th. We're looking at putting it to your tag, your tag for that committee.
Right.
So I'm working with Bryce on that. It's just in terms of the dates, whether you would see it first or who needs to see it.
Yeah, I would encourage governance and Katrina, if possible, if there's a chance to. It sounds like a bit of a workshop topic for me. I don't know if there's any. I'm just.
Well, to reassure you, the actions actually come out of other transport documents anyway.
Right.
So they have been drafted. Those technical actions have been drafted by Bryce. So they're, in essence, things you've seen in other documents like the public transport plan or, sorry, he talks in acronyms and I don't have them all. Katrina might be able to help me, but so there are actions that have come out of other documents.
Sure. I'm signalling a live governance interest in wearing my transport hat, an active discussion around what we can do to bring our transport emissions down. I think it's a 16% reduction.
That's about 20, yeah, 20% for the region.
For the region?
Yeah.
So, yeah, rather than just perhaps being presented with it afterwards, everyone be involved in that if you can, if that's at all possible. That's all I really wanted to share.
Unfortunately, the workshops were set up prior to the cyclone. You know, the dates were set up prior to the cyclone, post-cyclone. Just because of staff capacity, we had to cancel those workshops, and we're kind of making do with the best that we can right now to get something on the table, recognising that it's not the full scope of the originally intended plan and that there needs to be now more phases to it. Okay.
Any other questions? There are none. Councillor Harding, are you happy to move?
I am.
Yeah. And Councillor Williams. Any other speakers? Yes, Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on something that Councillor Harding touched on. There's a lot of discussion, and I've read it a lot in the media, it's come from even the Minister of Transport, that in light of Gabriel, we really just need to focus on adaptation at the moment. And it's, you know, it's all happening, just sort of get on board, live with it, and learn to adapt. I vehemently, strongly, and with every cell in my body, disagree with that. If we are struggling, immensely struggling, to deal with 1 degree of warming, what hope have we got of adapting to 3 degrees of warming? And unless New Zealand, starting within this region, which is the only thing we can control, show leadership on that, what moral claim have we got on the rest of the planet to come to the party as well? So I know we're really focused on adaptation as an organisation. I fully understand that. I don't want to take any energy off that. But you cannot ignore mitigation. Every opportunity we get for an adaptation solution that is also mitigation, we must apply. And a lot of what we're going to do will do that and address the farming sector that we're talking about here. That's keeping carbon in soils, it's all our catchment management, it's land for life, it's even letting rivers, giving them more room to move. All of that will actually have a mitigation benefit, but we cannot lose sight of mitigation. Thank you.
Thank you. Well put. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Thank you very much. We're doing well, team. Item 15, Strategic Projects Report. We can take this as read if everyone's comfortable with that. And if we have any specific questions for Bill and the exec, that would be fantastic.
All happy.
Yeah, Councillor Foley.
Sorry, Councillor, mate. Chris, point 4 IRG flood control and drainage, does the Highway 50 bridge fall into that? I mean, I know the project's done, but it came under that IRG program. It might be early days to talk to what's happened there, but perhaps you can give us, any update you can.
Thanks, Councillor. So 2 updates, one on the IRG funding. So we did meet with the overseeing panel a few weeks ago and put forward a revised program and extended our completion dates out. So that we haven't heard anything negative from that meeting, so we're taking that as a positive and continuing with that work. In terms of State Highway 50 Bridge, we have had our engineering staff out on site with Waka Kotahi and supporting them in finding a solution and diverting that channel as soon as water levels allow, so we can get in, or Waka Kotahi's contractors can get in. So there'll be a considerable amount of work there. It's too early to say exactly what it is or who it is funding, but I understand that Waka Kotahi have considerable funding for that site and will continue to work with them.
Any other questions? Councillor Roadley.
Probably not necessarily for you, Chris, maybe for Susie, around the NIWA welfare claims. You mentioned the special claims out of the S33 criteria. Could you just bring some clarity on what those are, and if there's any opportunity for next time when we're faced with an adverse event to kind of...
If you recall, Thank you to Councillor Rodley. If you recall at the last meeting, I presented a paper in regards to the challenges that we were having in relation to processing claims. At that time, I did mention we had met with NEMA, and as a result of that, they have helped us segregate out some of our claims such that it makes it really easier for them and us to articulate why, what, who and how. And they have been quite generous in their assistance with us to make some reimbursements that weren't really clear in the legislation. So some good wins happening there. And I actually think going forward that, yes, we will take these learnings to process in the event that there's another emergency by grouping up like expenses for like, rather than just going.
Well done. And we've just been working on our annual plan consultation, and I did note in that document one of the lines, and it refers to the 25 helicopters in the air per day, and my head just went, oh my gosh. So well done for sorting that, what must have been a soup of invoices and things. So
A soup.
okay.
Well,
Bill, did you want to add to that?
Have I just received an email today telling me that NEMA and CDM have extended their claims for Gabriel, extended the time period?
Could be.
In regard to welfare claims, yeah.
Yeah.
sorry, I haven't read
No,
that.
it's
Sorry.
okay. I think it came in literally today, which is interesting because I thought the cut-off was going to occur, but they've extended it. So we'll keep going.
Stu, could I have a second?
Yeah, sure.
Is that covered off? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. A second question for Ian and his team around the Land for Life program, which you've got coded as yellow diamonds. Just noting in the budget comment about the request raised for the surplus funds to be rolled over to the following year, and I'd really like to support that.
Councillor Roby?
There's me done. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kidden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris, I just wonder if we can help with more recent storm events and localised flooding, and I refer to issues brought to me from local constituents. For example, Awatoto, the Okawa stream at Fern Hill, and the flooding at the Hill Road junction with Seafield Road. So what I'm having reported back, and I actually went out and had a look, was quite extensive localised flooding, which may have been exacerbated or as accelerated or increased risk due to cyclone impacts on that environment. So my question is, what role has HBR as a regional council got, and where do we sit in terms of trying to either resolve those issues with, for example, Hastings District, etc.? So how's that environment being handled?
So I guess first up, it's a collaborative approach. We regularly talk with both Hastings and Napier about issues on the boundary or issues between stormwater, drainage. So we work quite well together. In terms of those instances, in terms of the Awatoto drainage, we have a review of that drainage network, a technical review in place, and we've communicated that to that community. And we're keeping a very close eye on that network, and those pump stations are back pumping at the 100% of their duty. So working hard with that. We're having active discussions with Napier about incorporating Awatoto into the review that Morrison Lowe are undertaking in terms of who should be the primary organisation in charge of what is now essentially an urban or an industrial stormwater service. And so that's an active discussion, and we've brought Morrison Lowe back on after a little bit of a gap through that local council election process. So they've been re-engaged, and Napier have undertaken that engagement. In terms of the Okawa Stream area, that's an area we're aware of, and there's a specific meeting being set up with those residents who were categorised as 2P. So we have an understanding of that situation. And in terms of the Hill Road Seafield, we've previously discussed that through with Napier, who my understanding is the primary drainage responsibility, and we continue to have those discussions about where those responsibilities best sit. So I think it's described as collaborative and trying to find the right home for the right service and make sure we're delivering the right level of service, which in some instances, such as Awatoto, will likely require significant investment into those pump stations and drainage networks.
Thank you. Councillor Lambert.
I just got a point perhaps you can clarify for us, Chris, is the some of our whānau, as well as some of our TLA's councillors, there's some confusion about who's responsible for certain bridges, drains, culverts, and there's also State Highway 2 comes into it as well with the transport. I know it sounds a bit tricky, but let's deal with State Highway 2 for a culvert or on State Highway 2, who's responsible for that and the drain leading up to it?
Yeah. So look, every case is different, but the general rule of thumb is if someone owns a bridge that crosses a stream or a river, the bridge owner or the asset owner is responsible for that maintenance, which includes any dealing with woody debris. And that's been the agreement within Hawke's Bay for some time. The same as if there's an owner of a culvert under the road, typically that would be the road owner as well, not always, but typically, and again, they would be responsible for managing that. We're working very hard as we invest in an improved asset management system to be very clear on the ownership of some of those assets, and we have a number of historical grey zones that we're working through, so we have crystal, clarity, absolute clarity on who is responsible, so we ensure the work's done. Because what we know is sometimes with those grey zones, it takes an incident or something to happen for the pressure to go on, and we're working through a number of those at the moment, and we want to correctly record the information so that we don't go on with an uncertainty.
Well, the problem our people have is how do they then get any issues they raise, how do they raise them with the Ministry of Transport or with us, or do they go to their TLA, their local council?
Well, so I think the first thing is if they can have a rough assessment themselves, but we're quite happy and we frequently do forward on issues to Waka Kotahi, to Kiwi Rail or our district councils. It's a normal part of the business we do. So I'm happy to take any of those concerns on after, outside of this meeting and pass them on to the right.
Just a point in case is that issues in the Wairau district, the Wairau council takes a pink report or pink report paper. You write it down on a pink bit of paper, and someone will action it.
Yep.
But these are different, obviously, across all our councils, including our own. So, how does someone track something from Wairau through the regional council? They phone it in because we're obviously the distance out, or do we expect them to head up on our catchment managers, or is there an easy system for them to access?
Yep. So there are different ways. If they phone it in, they'll get a ticket number, and if they give their details, we're able to get back.
Right.
We have a relationship manager in Wairau who's able to, I guess, deal with some of those more significant issues. We have staff permanently based in Wairau as well. A matter of contacting them. So I think there's a variety of matters, but it is true to say that with 5 different councils in Hawke's Bay, sometimes navigating that issue can be challenging, but we're all trying the best we can to resolve those issues.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? There are none. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Susie. If we can have a mover and a seconder to receive the update.
Happy to move.
Thank you, Councillor Foley and Councillor Van Beek. All those agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Moving to item 16, the significant organisational activity through to July. We'll take this as read also. Are there any specific questions for the team? Councillor Van Beek.
Yeah, I've got a question for Chris, I think it is. We're giving him some exercise.
Thanks, Chris.
Just a reminder, we do have the whole executive team over there.
In that case, I change my question.
Share the questions around.
We've got a extensive drain network, and after the cyclone, more than 30% of it is being either damaged or affected. Have we actually have got line of sight of all of our network and know where silt deposits are, or whether there are scours or anything? Have we got it all down pat?
So my answer would be it's not 100%. We're very aware of the most significant issue and aware, significant issues, but there are some issues that we're still uncovering. For example, we're still doing inspections of some assets that have been buried in silt, woody debris and the like. So I think there'll be a small trail of small issues, but in terms of those significant issues we're on top of, in terms of where our pain points are, which is around Awatoto and Pakawhai in terms of drainage, we're fully aware of those. For example, we've dug out the entire Waitangi drain, I think 4 times now, and will continue to do so because of that environment. So I think we're substantially there, but I can't say that we've picked up 100% of the faults or defects or damage in the system.
Subsequent question. So if a member of the public wants to identify or make us aware of issues with a drain that we own that nobody's actually has boots on or eyes on, what is the best process you would advise us?
Just to contact us through the reception, and they can log that job with and I think it's the operations email address. What we might do is just get a bit of a comms out after this. I'm unsure of the exact address off the top of my head, but we do welcome reports in. Sometimes they're duplicate. Look, if they're very obvious in obvious places, we've probably picked it up. It's more stuff in the back blocks, particularly a lot of the drains that are in the back of orchards and things. There are some access issues. It has been very wet, particularly so culverts and things culvert blockages are constantly being rung in. And we deal with those as well. So
yeah,
we welcome that. We welcome that. Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Rodley.
Kia ora, Chair. There will be many people whose hearts will be warmed to see number 11, the review of the Mahanga wetland and stream is underway. Thank you for that. My question is around item 15. The committee has been formed by HBRC and WDC to explore the flood resilience in Wairoa. Could you just talk to that, Chris, around?
Yep. So I think the word committee is probably a bit of a strong word. It's probably a collaborative process. Wairoa District Council very helpfully engaged some specialist resources themselves early on just after Cyclone Gabriel. And so they've got some good ideas. We've let them know about our approach in terms of our, I think we've got 6 parallel professional services teams looking at that land categorisation solutions. So we're working together, and our staff have been up talking to Wairoa District Council. So I think that's a good collaborative effort. We've also met with Tātou and also members of the public have been, submitting their ideas about what flood mitigation looks like in Wairoa as well. So I think it's so far it's been a very good discussion, and we're working hard to get those solutions identified and funded through working with government as well.
Thank you. And so what I'm hearing is that you would be willing to invite public suggestions into that process. I know many folk I come across have got their own theories of what that protection might look like. Are you welcoming those?
So we are, and I think part of the approach with Wairoa District Council is to perhaps talk to a number of people who might represent the community, who we can meet with some of those ideas.
And so how might the members of the public would that be through the Wairoa District Council?
So I think there's a little bit of work to do there to work through Wairoa with a proactive way of going ahead. Yep. Still got to design that process, but it's a consultative, collaborative process going forward.
Thank you, Councillor McIntosh.
Thanks, Chair. You'll be disappointed if I don't raise this, but item 8. Do you have so Clive River dredging? It says 12 or 24 months for a decision. Do you have a feel as to whether that's at the 12 or 24 end of the scale?
Give him a pink slip.
No.
Pink slip.
So it's not my decision. And it's very hard to tell at this point.
It's presumably driven by, workload at the moment, anticipated workload and that sort of thing, and taking that into account. It's in that context that I really was asking the question.
Yeah. Look, I think it's too early to say precisely. We're still understanding the full impact of our work going forward and precisely what will be funded and what won't be funded. And so it's just too early to tell.
Councillor Harding.
Kia ora, Chair. Look, this is a question which may or may not fit within the strategic projects report under the recovery program, but it's definitely a question that, Chris, I hope you'll be able to answer, because it's a question that has been put to me a number of times, and it's around the recovery task force for silt and debris, and whether there is a sunset clause on the support for recovery of silt and woody debris from affected landowners. And the concern is, of amongst some landowners, that if they delay their efforts too long, and there have been all sorts of reasons for delay and waiting for clarity about the extent of government support and access to machinery and just capacity to deal with the issues. One area of uncertainty remains, or concern, worry remains, how long councils can stand behind their promise to pick up. Any light you can shed on that would be appreciated.
Yeah, so I think there's two parts to that. One is on the council responsibilities, the council land, and the other is on that commercial. So certainly Susie can come up on the commercial. Look, from my discussions with the other councils and with the task force, I think will be, so it's, in terms of the council activity, it's limited by funding at the moment, based on our known funding. And I think, we'll be working through that funding probably between now and December. So a precise number is difficult to give, but that's the scale of the issue that we'll be dealing with it for months. And we obviously will do as much as we can, as efficiently as we can with the funding we have. In terms of the commercial silt, Susie might have some comments on that.
I just both agreements that we have with government in relation to the residential silt, or the local government residential and the commercial, both those contracts have an end date of 30th of June 2024. So there is an expectation from government that those funds will be used up by then. I think the risk you might be alluding to is on the commercial silt program, grants that are handed or given to applicants, those funds must be used by the 30th of June 2024, else there is an expectation that they will be returned. We have already gone back to the government on that to say the complexities of issuing the funds in the first place are delaying people getting those funds, but also once the applicant has the funds, they've then got to source the contractors, and we have already had significant feedback to say that they're not sure they can spend the money by the 30th of June. So we will go back to government and work on those clauses when there's more fact-based as to how that's going to work in January.
Can I just, for the point of absolute clarity here, make the point that the risk that I'm referencing is the risk that that is not money that comes from a fund, a commercial fund. Let's imagine that the commercial operator has applied their own funds or funds that they have got from the silt fund to aggregate waste on their property, and the current operating understanding of those landowners is that as a separate activity, funded separately, the task force will come and pick those piles up. So I'm not sure exactly where the sunset, from what you've said, whether there is a sunset, and if so, where. I imagine there is, and it may be that we're not able to be specific on that, but at the very least, I've alerted you to the issue, and there is a concern out there, and the more clarity we can bring, the better.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I just had a couple of questions. I'm very surprised my colleague, Councillor Curtin, hasn't already been all over this, but Napier Urban Waterways. There's some items in there that I didn't recognise, for example, an education plan, cultural monitoring plan, sediment sampling, presentation to Te Komiti. What exactly are we talking about here?
Yes, so as part of the combined operation of that network between Napier City Council and ourselves, we hold a joint consent. So many of those activities are relevant to what we need to do under that consent. So it's just highlighting sort of what's going on currently. And look, one of the issues is resourcing of those consent conditions, so basically staff. And so part of what we're doing there is looking at procuring some additional resources through consulting scientists and technical people.
So that's like the comprehensive catchment consent for stormwater?
Yeah, so this is the main discharge consent into the Ahuri estuary. Yep. Okay.
I have one other question, and it's in the same sort of recovery guise. It's not directly in this report, but in a transport capacity, I'm extremely worried, as I know a lot of people are, about the pressures the lack of a Waiahurki bridge is placing on our expressway, on our public transport system, combining with our bus driver shortage, really putting a lot of challenges on the transport team here at the council. Have we got any line of sight as to when that bridge might be completed? What we're looking at there, because it's just going to unlock so much. And the congestion that we've got, it doesn't take a lot more congestion on the expressway on the Clive Road to really bring things to a standstill, and it's affecting a lot of people.
Yep.
I know Hastings District will be working hard at it, I just wouldn't mind knowing.
Yep. So Katrina's, October.
Katrina's indicated October.
Do we have secret source of information?
I think.
I think it's secret.
No.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, well, HDC have communicated to the Waiahurki community that it'll be a 2-lane bridge with a pedestrian
2-lane
element.
So it's not going to be...
Bailey.
Not Bailey.
Yeah.
No. Okay, could we just get an answer to that? Not necessarily immediately, but I think the public needs to know what the timeline is, what the plan is, and why that seems to be the last bridge in the queue. For a lot of... Hastings has repaired just an enormous number of bridges. Where's that one at? Would be really, really helpful.
Any other questions?
So if staff could come back to me on that, please. Perhaps some comms on it as well.
So our advice is October, and we'll get it.
And confirm the nature of the bridge.
That'd be great, thank you.
And that is the
I'll do that.
the temporary repair, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Because there is other plans, and there's lots of rumours around that, what the future may look like between that bridge and the Puketapu Bridge.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
No other questions? Neil, Councillor Curtin? No. Fantastic. Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the updates? Councillor Van Baken, Councillor Harding, all those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. I could ask for an extension. Okay, so we have 2 options. It's time for a break, or we can continue on and extend until we are finished.
Councillor,
2 more items.
Councillor Rick Barker would have always gone for the break, because that's what the union stipulates. But I would like to move that we actually carry on.
Continue on. Is everyone comfortable with that? Yes. Thank you. So discussion of minor items. Councillor Harding.
Kia ora, Chair. That was a little bit quicker than I had thought, so if you just bear with me for a second, I'll speak to
Your 5 minutes. Your 5 minutes has started, by the way. You can take as much as you like.
Right. So, so this minor item I have entitled Silt Stabilisation for Health, and what I first want to do to introduce this is to read you some excerpts from an article written by Michael Fowler, published in the Hawke's Bay today on the 9th of June. So please bear with me, I will try to be quick. The 1938 Esk River flood was a significant natural disaster, but its effects didn't stop after the flood waters subsided. records from the time show the silt-choked valley was in the summer following the flood being compared to the American Midwest. Then in January 1939, violent gales swept up the dry silt, turning the valley into a giant dust bowl. Farmers were forced to stay indoors and seal their houses with all their windows shut and crevices around the doors packed with sacks. Silt deposits in the valley had by May 1938 been baked hard where they had not been oversown with grass seed. It was feared in September 1938 that unsown areas would turn Esk Valley into a dust nuisance by blowing off the top layer of dry silt. The Department of Agriculture recommended that farmers who had not sown their lands do so quickly with Cape barley, which is thought to combat the dust nuisance produced by a good sward. It wasn't to be. In January 1939, so much dust from the silt deposits was blown away that ground levels had reduced in some places by 5 feet. So there's a comment that might have been a blessing for some who'd had a lot of silt, but it wasn't a blessing for all the valley. A lot of silt was blown out to sea. Most of it covered roads or piled up against houses, buildings, hedges and other objects requiring removal once again. Now there's a lot of themes and issues in there that we can all relate to today that we couldn't prior to February. My concern and my suggestion is that as a council we consider at a landscape scale the state of the stability of silt across our region and consider risk management around that going into the coming spring. And from all that we know, we face similar conditions to what were described in 1939, but not just in the Esk, but in many other areas and across the Heretaunga Plains as well. We know, and Councillor Van Beek, myself and others have been at pains to highlight the opportunity that we've had coming into winter to stabilise as much of the silt as possible through the use of planting. Unfortunately, the complexity of the response and the complexities of dealing through central government have meant our response has been slower, much slower than is ideal. That leaves us with a lot of unstabilised silt, that particularly where it's deeper, where it is not well grassed and we have a volunteer sward. There is a significant risk going into a El Nino spring that we'll be back to 1939, but right across the Heretaunga Plains. No organisation at this point appears to be considering that risk. We heard through our recovery committee last week that certainly the silt and debris team are considering the issues of dust management around their own sites, but nobody is considering those other sites, particularly the private sites, that will be vulnerable come spring. I believe that this organisation is well placed to investigate that issue and not necessarily take it on board, but to find a home for it so that we are being proactive and not asleep at the wheel in spring. Okay. So my suggestion is that we instruct our Chief Executive to report back to the next council meeting on options for risk management in respect of flood-related wind-blown silt.
Thank you, Councillor Harding. Very good timing. So I've been made aware by Leanne and reminded that we can't have a decision or resolve anything.
No, but the Chief Executive Officer accepts and understands and will report back next meeting.
Thank you,
and
Mr.
discussions have already occurred with the Medical Officer of Health, Bridget, who is raising the same issue, and a number of people were in the earlier part of June, before we got significant rain, already noting wind-blown dust as a major issue likely next year.
Thank you.
Point well made, thank you, Councillor Harding. Councillor Foley.
Thank you, Chair. Well, hopefully I won't be giving you any extra jobs here, Bill. But very excited really to speak at the end of the day to what really over the weekend was a significant weather event. Now, how significant? You could look back a couple of years and maybe the Regional Council would have put out a release acknowledging it and left it at that. But nonetheless, we live in a time post 14th of February where people, I guess their mental state is not quite the same. And to give you an example, I got a message on Friday lunchtime from a constituent I'd never heard of or from before, lives on this side of the Waipawa, needing to travel over the Waipawa River, Tukituk, on their way to their night shift at Silverfen Farms in Takapo, and just want to know, will they be able to get home that night, or will there be no bridges? So that gives you an example of what people are feeling out there. And not only that, but just the leadership that this organisation has and the responsibility around the trust in our communities and that we've got their back in these types of situations. So that was really really special to receive that message, and thankful for that person to reach out. Just to talk to what really was a team effort over the weekend, and I don't like mentioning names because I'll miss someone out, but Craig Goodyear and the science team does a superb job and always has, but we get a lot more visibility over it during these times, and the interpretation that he puts into the weather forecasting, and then is able to pinpoint, in our catchments and rivers, flows and things like that is just, vital information and really valuable. So thanks to Craig and his team. Chris, Hamish and all the works group who are always out there anyway, but and I'll get onto the comms team in a minute, but the visibility of them out there, checking beforehand, checking during, the likes of covering the stop banks that, haven't grassed over and things like that, that's, we need to be really thankful for that. And finally, the comms team, I think the effort they put in over that Friday, Saturday and Sunday, not just updating people, but the graphics. And so I don't know who produced that, whether it was comms or Chris's team or both, but I mean, that is such a valuable piece of information and so well received. And then just the graphics and everything continued. And we heard in Waipawa meeting last night how much value people put into that, and they were able to make sense of that information where they might not have if it was in another form. So well done to Mike, Jen and the rest of the comms team. Superb job. And I think, I just continue to get, I just received another email at lunchtime, the appreciation of that information that reassured people that the bridges, were still going to be there, the houses weren't going to be flooded again and things like that because of the forecasting and the information going out. And so finally, to just a big thanks. It was a team effort, and the community themselves that shared all that information, that reported back what they were seeing. It really was a team effort. So just thanks to everyone that was involved, and yeah, thank God we got through it, mostly unscathed, apart from a few more bridges and damage on our roads. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foley. Thank you. That concludes our public meeting. So if we can move into public excluded. Thank you, Councillor Sears, Councillor Hokianga. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried